Welcome to another episode of Tech Society for all your tech and business analysis and other important topics that revolve around technology and modern society. Hosted by tech entrepreneurs and whiskey enthusiasts John Nguyen and Alex Dunmo.
Welcome to another episode of Tech Society. You're in for a treat today as we are talking to author of The Soul of an Entrepreneur, Work and Life Beyond the Startup Myth by David Sax. This book explores the myth of the startup created by Silicon Valley and contrasts it with the reality of real entrepreneurs creating businesses and working in them. David Sax asks the question, what actually is an entrepreneur? And what does it mean to be one? Can you tell us a bit about your background, how you got to the point where you wanted to write The Soul of an Entrepreneur?
Yeah, it came from kind of two sort of directions, right? One, I guess, was external. And that was as a journalist and someone who did a lot of, mixture of kind of business and culture as the focus of what I've done in my previous books. I had written some stuff and was really interested in people who were working for themselves. And I'd written some articles about, people who were doing startups and it always really focused on entrepreneurs and writing about them and people who were working in coffee shops. And there seemed to be this buzz and this boom around entrepreneurship all over the world. And I kind of wanted to chronicle it. And that's what sort of set me out. But what I found was almost this, when I started doing research, and actually this was my Australian friend, Greg Kaplan, professor in the United States of labor economics. And he's like, oh, well, you should check out on that. And I did. And, he sent me stuff and it actually showed that quite the opposite. Like in the land of entrepreneurial dreams in the United States, there were half as many people starting businesses and going out to work with themselves as there were when I was born. So it was sort of this interesting false sense of this golden era. And then the other part of it was internal, right? I've always worked for myself. I've never had an actual job. Actually, the last actual job I had was teaching skiing at Falls Creek Ski Resort in Victoria. That was like the last paycheck. I had like a paycheck from I don't know, like the Royal Bank of Victoria or something like that. Like that was the last 9 to 5 job or whatever hours you work in a ski resort. And so I'd always worked for myself. Most of the people in my family work for themselves. They're entrepreneurs. And, it was something that was very much a part of my identity. And I really wanted to get a deeper understanding of what that actually meant.
Well, that was striking to me and resonated with me. The fact that you found that even though this startup culture is so prevalent everywhere, it's massive. People love talking about it. The actual rate of people starting businesses is lower than it's ever been.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you go beyond the pitch nights and the demo days and the co-working spaces, which are mostly going bankrupt in other parts of the world, you realize what a very small microcosm of the economy and entrepreneurship that actually represents. Less than 5%, 4%, single digits of economic activity in a city like Perth or here in Toronto or, in other places. But we focus on it so much because, there are these tremendous successes. There is tremendous amounts of money. And so the rags to riches mythology of entrepreneurship, which is largely false, falls very neatly into that. It's cool. It's sexy. It's not like someone starting a auto body shop or, three people in their, starting an accounting firm in a suburb somewhere. And yet that's an incredibly necessary thing. You're a software company, right? You guys probably have an accounting firm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or lawyers or, office cleaning firm. All of these things are started by entrepreneurs. And yet we're not really telling their stories. We're not telling the broader story of entrepreneurship. We're just telling this one very finite slice.
There's a few companies, without naming them, in Perth and Australia who are kind of considered that they've already hit success. They're the darlings, the unicorns, and they've raised millions and millions and millions of dollars, got big valuations. They've never turned a profit. And some of them are even pre-revenue. What do you make of that?
Rushing it. Look, venture capital And that mode of, using outsized equity funding, high risk to back businesses or products or research that will take a long period of time in order to be commercialized is a very small niche but important model that you need for biotechnology and advanced chip design and all these sorts of things, right? The problem is that when it's being used for like sneakers and, blankets and 1,000 mattress companies that nobody needs, and just being sort of thrown willy-nilly into any kind of business and saying, no, you want to grow and start a business, this is the way to do it. You have a pitch deck, you go to a demo day, here's your hockey stick, here's the 5 things you need to do, here's how you have to dress. And then you go in front of these assholes and you tell them what it's going to be, and they're going to sit there and they'll be like, yeah, I'm going to give you a shot, or no, I'm not. And then, you got your seed round, your angel round, your Series A, your Series B, and Series C. And then like, it's like this linear trajectory to some sort of endpoint that like, that's it. But that is one way to grow a business, a software business, right? There are plenty of software businesses that start out and they're like, here's our product, here's how we made it, we put our money into it, maybe we got a bank loan or something like that, or maybe we have like 1 or 2 investors, and like, here's how much it costs to have this, or here's how much it costs to like make this piece of hardware. Are you going to buy it? Great. Okay. When you buy it, we get profit off that. But that's almost seen as a bad thing, right? And I know companies that have been, and I've interviewed them, and was like, well, we're not looking for revenue yet. We don't want that to like disrupt our valuation. It's like, what is the purpose of what you're doing? If not that, it becomes a game in itself, and it becomes a game with costumes and players and roles and prejudices and all of that built in, but it's not reality. And there's been so many super hyped exits and IPOs that went nowhere because, at the end of the day, the business fundamentals weren't there. So it's like a monoculture of entrepreneurship.
You followed those 2 guys from Stanford who had the internship company idea. How did they actually go in the end?
I don't think they got I think they got like $75,000 from some VC and used it to test a few things. And then I think both of them have gone on to like take jobs, right? They graduated right into the pandemic. Like, I feel terrible.
That's unfortunate.
They graduated right into the pandemic. It really sucks. I know Nikhil was in India with his family and doing some work there. I mean, they're very smart, very nice guys. And the idea was but it was just kind of like, you're at Stanford. Like, if you do a startup, people are going to give you money. This is the thing you do here.
It's interesting you mentioned they've got other people's money, which I think is quite a few times through the book. You mentioned that what is an entrepreneur? One of the old school definitions is someone who puts their finances at risk, essentially. And these guys aren't, right? They're just working with other people's money. There's very little ramifications for when and if they fail. They just end up going and getting a job, right? There's no debt,
start the next thing.
Yeah. Do you feel that actually like waters down what is an entrepreneur in that sense? I mean,
I'm not it depends, right? I think if someone's willing to give you millions of dollars to do your business, and you would take it. I mean, there's a cost to it, right? You have to give up something. So that's, I think, a big part of it. No, I think even, the most contrived tech bros, so to speak, anywhere in the world, like, and someone who uses the term #entrepreneur, like, they're still an entrepreneur. They're as much as an entrepreneur as the person who doesn't do that. And the experience that they go through is the same one. I think that's the truth, right? Like, whatever business you're doing, as you go through that journey as an entrepreneur, you're going to experience those same sorts of things. The realities, the sort of emotional, financial, personal roller coaster of it. And I think the difference is like that world glorifies it and it simplifies it in a way that does a disservice to those people.
What about people who don't fit the mold in Silicon Valley? Whether their skin color or their actual like socioeconomic background,
gender.
Yeah. How do they fare?
I mean, I hear like, in that world where you have decision makers, venture capitalists, like most of the money that goes to those companies goes to people that look like them. It's largely white men, Asian men, who have gone to like a handful of elite universities and live in a handful of cities. And that just doesn't reflect the reality of talent and, people's capabilities. I mean, you guys are in Perth, Australia. Your partner is, a Vietnamese woman. That should have no bearing on the success of how you're doing. But when everybody that you're trying to get money from is going to fit the same sort of background, it's like a caste system almost for entrepreneurship, which again flies in the face of the reality of, entrepreneurship is supposed to be about the equality of opportunity for everybody, right? It's sort of this, like, it's where, libertarians and capitalists and even, social democrats kind of can all rally together, and they're like, well, we support everybody should have a chance to start a business. Of course, like that's a good thing. That's a universally good thing. And so that was really one of the striking things. Like I give a talk, when I give talks or interviews, and I cite those statistics of like, can you guess, like tech group, that I'm talking to, like, does anyone want to guess what percent of venture capital funding went to either like companies run by people of color, with like black or brown skin, or companies run by women? And they're like 20%, 30%. I'm like, how about 2.5%? Right? Like, it's just, that's like a shocking rate of inequality. I mean, it's just staggering. And perhaps it's better, here in Canada and Australia and other places, but
I doubt it.
not.
Yeah, probably not.
Not that much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the, it's a commentary on that industry and the way it is, but I think again, it's a monoculture. It's a monoculture of, we succeeded at this, and this is the way you pursue a business. You want to be an entrepreneur. This is how you got to look. This is how you got to dress. This is how you got to talk. This is how you got to act, which is built upon the experience of the people who did it, which is like largely white guys. And so it just reflects back on that, right?
Your experience in Silicon Valley, how close is it to the actual HBO TV show Silicon Valley?
I was not there long enough, and I have not seen enough episodes of the show.
Yeah.
But it's a great show, but it's pretty dead on.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
One of the people you followed in the book was a black entrepreneur, and she was creating products for black women, and she went in front of VC people and they just didn't get it right. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? So they don't see the market potential because it's not them.
It's not them. It's like, what is this? Like, I remember it was a lipstick company called Mented. They did end up getting funding, but they had to go to like 70 VCs. These were two girls who graduated from Harvard VCs. Business School. That's Harvard Business School, right? Yeah. So like, they're incredibly smart. They both worked in the consumer package makeup, and then they were doing makeup for black women,
which is a huge market.
Huge market that was underserved because L'Oreal, is not making products that works with their skin tones and their hair, and underserving that market. And it was like, I don't know, is there a market there? But then the next guy who come up, who's dressed in a hoodie, he's like, I'm doing a scooter AI blockchain. It's like, oh wow.
Yeah,
take my money,
write you a check. Right? Yeah. What did you make of the contempt people had in Silicon Valley for small business? I think quite a few of the chapters at the start of the book were all about lifestyle businesses and how these VC guys and academics and everyone kind of uses that as an insult. Like, oh no, this sounds like a lifestyle business.
Yeah. Which I'm sure is something that you guys have heard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
At some point in your lives. And it's meant to be this like, why would I give you money? This is just something that you want to run, and make a living from. You're like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. The vast majority of businesses are lifestyle businesses. But again, here is where it gets into like this bigger philosophy of what the point of business is and what the point of an economy is. And, it is that, I guess I'm going to misuse the economic term, so I don't want to do it right, but it's not like neoliberal, but it is this idea that, like a Milton Friedman kind of, the most important thing is like the maximum amount of growth possible. And so people look at it and they're like, well, what are the biggest companies that generate the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time? Oh, they're, Amazon. Okay. we don't need, thousands and thousands of like bookstores and hardware stores and things. We need like the next one Amazon, because that's going to drive all the, job growth, and that'll feed our taxes and whatever, even though, hey, they don't pay taxes. And it's kind of like, it's a very small-minded mindset. It's like, you're in Western Australia, which is similar to like Western Canada. It's like, oh, we don't need a bunch of like small things. We just need like one big fucking gold mine. Like if we can just get one big ass gold mine or one big oil project, like that's going to bring the jobs and that'll be great. And like everything will trickle down from that. There's that similar mentality there, I think. But when you look at what a healthy economy is, like a healthy economy has a range of different sized businesses run by people, some of which are small mom and pops, some of which are large, ambitious corporations. All of them started out small. None of them start out big. I think that's one of the big misconceptions. And they all serve a certain purpose. Like that small mom and pop, accounting firm, it's not going to become, Price Waterhouse or Deloitte or whatever, but it could be the niche firm that serves, a small market of small software companies in the third biggest Australian city. Like that serves its purpose. And not only that, but the people who run it pays for their families, it pays for their houses. It's part of a community. They might sponsor the footy club or whatever. And so, you need like a variety of businesses of different sizes. And I think the lifestyle thing is like, so many people choose entrepreneurship for that, to be able to have control over your life. That's the one thing that everybody gets who's an entrepreneur. Is like, you may not get wealthy, you may not have success, but like you'll have control.
You have a sense
as much
of
control as you're willing to.
A sense of freedom, I think, which is super important to me.
Yes.
Yeah. That I think when people ask, why do you do this? I think this freedom is right up the top, even if it's just a sense
because
of
you don't
freedom.
know if you're going to make just the sweet, tasty illusion of freedom like our friends in the United States are experiencing, slipping through their fingers.
Before we continue this podcast, here's a message from our sponsor.
We believe that you can create art and beauty with technology. We think big. We move quietly. We are Ninja Software.
Oh, Lord.
We wouldn't actually say you would do the entrepreneurship track to make a huge profit either. Not as stable. It's not as reliable, especially here in Perth. We have a large, heavy resources industry, and it's very easy to just be set for life, really, by just doing some solid mining work and giving it to China.
Yeah, break those. Yeah, send them off to China.
Yeah, and that's you for
there
life.
You go. You get your beach house.
Yeah. Here it's jet skis actually.
Jet skis.
Yeah.
The ultimate.
It's the one thing that everyone.
Ultimate douchebag accessory. Everybody wants a jet ski. It's great.
So you mentioned a while back in
have that jet ski.
In this recording, in this episode, that entrepreneurship in general has declined over time. Can you talk more to that? Like why do millennials take less risks, or maybe the Gen Zs or whatever, the young people?
Yeah, or what is holding millennials back?
Yeah,
I think, look, there's like a basic correlation in economics, which is that the wealthier the country, the higher the employment, the lower risk number of people who are going to be self-employed. The highest, if you go just up the coast and over the ocean to Papua New Guinea, it's like probably like, significant multiple times more people work for themselves in some capacity or own their own business they do in Australia, because there just aren't that many jobs. And so you have to create opportunity. The lowest places with the lowest amount of entrepreneurship is like Japan, and even the United States is quite low as well. And I think that's, that just reflects like the job market, the opportunities that are there. Most people are not willing to sort of take that risk and are not interested in doing it as well. They just want a job, then great, good for them. Yeah. So it'll be interesting, because now we're in the midst of this, pandemic and recession and businesses closing. And, I have 2 family members that have been laid off in the past couple months from their like well-paying, very stable corporate jobs. And so both of them are sort of talking about turning to entrepreneurship. So you're seeing the beginnings of the sort of uptick for it. And so, millennials, who are of course going to be the most screwed, and Gen Z's, like, it's something that they may have to come to, but they'll probably have to come to it on their own terms. I think they're being sold this idea that, entrepreneurship means being in a startup and looking and speaking like Adam Newman or some crap. And the reality is it could be anything. It's like, at this point, it's like, whatever business you can start that'll like get you through this, like, that's it. That's entrepreneurship.
You mentioned some stuff about, Stanford and teaching entrepreneurship. Do you think that they're missing like a huge chunk of what should be in entrepreneurial education? Is this something that people need to learn out of necessity, or is there a way to systemize teaching that spirit of entrepreneurship?
I don't know if you can teach the spirit of it. I think you can kind of, examine it a little more. I mean, I think the biggest misconception, or the place where things went, in my opinion, a little bit astray in entrepreneurship education, which has really taken off over the past 15, 20 years.
The universities here all do.
Everywhere, all over
courses,
the world, right? Yeah. Is like, oh, here is a specialty in the business faculty or the faculty of economics. This is an economic activity. This is a business activity. And we're going to study it in the sense of like, we're going to study the inputs and the business models. And it's going to be about like, what is, it's like management theory. But for those who are entrepreneurs, it's actually so much more of a humanistic thing, right? Like, yes, business is the structure in which it falls under, and yet it's about people's cultures, as we talked about. It's about people's hopes and dreams and their family life, and it's business seen through the lens of an individual's emotional, personal experience, and that's something that isn't taught, and that's the big missing piece. You're really missing, like, if you don't acknowledge that and talk about it, like, you're not going to get that sense of that entrepreneurial spirit. It's not like work as hard as you have to and crush it. The education needs to actually acknowledge the realities of what it is and the deeper motivations behind it.
I also think that even just operationally, the things they focus on are something that, in our experience, things you want to outsource as soon as possible anyway. You don't want to be doing your own books when, at a certain point, and you don't want to be controlling all those things yourself. You should be focusing on the actual spirit of the business. But they're focused on, as you said, what they think of as the fundamentals, which I don't think actually lines up with reality.
Yeah, and everybody learns those fundamentals. Like, you don't need to go take a course in entrepreneurship to learn that, right? Like, everyone figures it out. If your family could figure it out, after they arrived, fleeing Saigon in the 1970s, like, you don't need a course to sort of teach you those sorts of things. But and then at its worst, it becomes this, very prescriptive approach of like, you have a company, it has to fit in this size of the market. Here's how you make a pitch deck. Here's this. No, you don't want that. That's a lifestyle business. Like, here's the things we want. We have a demo day. Everybody's going through it. Everybody's going through the sausage factory, But don't be surprised when you come at the end as a sausage.
I'm glad you mentioned lifestyle business again, because I want to talk about Rockaway Beach, which, when reading the book, I got the feeling that you had the most fun researching it down there. Tracy Obolsky kind of featured quite heavily. I definitely felt you really enjoyed yourself down there, and that left a big imprint on you and kind of set the tone for the lifestyle business section of the book. Yeah, I mean, who among us, I don't know, do you guys surf at all, or? We're software dorks.
Yeah. It's you live in a very, very sharky part of Australia too, so I get that.
As Australians, we probably should surf.
Okay.
But yeah, we're not.
Forget that stereotype. But who amongst us hasn't been on a beach vacation somewhere, whether it's like in Australia and the Gold Coast, or in some islands, in
Bali
Mexico,
is where most Australians go. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like, you see the guy and, he's got the like bar on the beach, or you stay in the hotel and like, the couple that owns it, and it's like, oh yeah, we used to be lawyers and we gave it all up for this, like living the dream life, namaste, and you're like, man, maybe I could, like, maybe I'm doing it wrong, right? Like, that actually looks like that looks like a really good version of success, even if they're not making that much money, even if, they're dealing with all sorts of the hassles of, I don't know, Indonesian bureaucracy. There is that kind of fantasy and the dream of it. And the reality is like the hard work that those people do every day to make that thing happen. But the point is like for them, success is the state of being that they've created. They're like, I want to live in Bali on the beach and make a living by doing that affords me to do it. Like, I'm not going to make $1 billion in Australia and then move. That's this kind of fantasy that everyone has. Oh, then I'll retire. It's like, I'm just going to go now and do it. And so they go and they open up their business, so they do their thing. And it's like, that's the end of the rainbow right there. Like, they've arrived at it and they've created that life around that business. It allows them to do, what they want to do, whether it's surfing or, just spending more time with their kids, even if they're just staying, in the same city, indulging in different hobbies. Like, I went paddleboarding today, even though it's November here and we're in the middle of a heat wave. And it was just like, I was stressed out from the election stuff. And I was like, I'm going to go paddleboarding, I can do that because I work for myself. My friend's like, don't you have a job? It's like, no, I don't have a job. No one's paying me. I'm not getting any paychecks every 2 weeks, but like, I can do this. You can't tell me I can't.
I like that. You've mentioned a few times where, entrepreneurs are their own boss. They're generally a smaller scale business. Do you think that this, this crazy world of 2020, post-pandemic, whenever that may be, we'll see a rise in these kind of like community-focused, cooperative, decentralized, small-scale business entrepreneurs?
I hope so. I mean, I think it comes down to like where there's opportunity. I walk around my neighborhood here in Toronto now, and I look at tons of businesses that have closed over the past 7 months, restaurants, gyms, things that just retail stores, like things that are not well suited to survive the economic conditions of lockdowns and the pandemic. But I'm also seeing all sorts of other things opening up, places that aren't restaurants, but are suited, like specifically open for like food delivery and faster stuff, places that are selling products that are, geared towards sort of what's happening right now. Like, I think you'll see these sort of necessity driving stuff. And I think also like within your own industry, the industry of technology, software, there is a growing hunger, I sense, for alternative sources of capital and really just like alternative paths of building a business. I think like there's a lot of smart people from a tremendously diverse array of backgrounds, whether that's like their cultural or sexual or ethnic background, or just like an intellectual idea. And the idea that, everybody has to be some Ayn Rand worshiping libertarian, to be a tech entrepreneur is totally false. And so there are people now blazing new paths, being very entrepreneurial about like not only what company they build, but like how they build that company, how they fund it, how the capital gets sort of allocated and spread around. And so I do think that we're going to see, all sorts of alternatives, because that sort of VC focused mindset and model is not great for business, not great for investors, and one that's like fundamentally broken.
What do you think of Mark Cuban and the Shark Tank?
I mean, I think it's again, like there's two sides to it, right? And here we call it Dragon's Den. I think Canada was one of the
there's like UK's Dragon's Den, Canada's Dragon's Den.
Yeah,
Where's
there's
Shark
like
Tank
30
here?
of them around the world. Yeah. So I think the positive is like it actually is this aspirational forum for everyday entrepreneurs to be able to see themselves like, oh, maybe I should start a business. That's cool. Like, look at these women and what they're doing with this diaper cleaning.
Yeah. Actually, there's lots of stuff like that. Actually, interject quickly when you mentioned Dragon's Den. I've watched all of them. UK and Canada are really they can still be dicks, but they're nicer.
They're a bit nicer.
They're way nicer. Australia and US.
Kevin O'Leary though.
Yeah, I mean, there's always an asshole. Like it's inevitable.
Like he's a wannabe Trump.
Yeah,
But So I think that's the problem with it, and the downside is again this narrative of like, so you want to be an entrepreneur. the first thing you do is have to stand in front of a room of like rich assholes who are going to insult you and rip you apart and like sell them on your idea. And if you can sell them on your idea, then they'll give you money and you're set. It's like, I know people who've gone on that show just to get PR for their companies and had no actual intention of like making those products. I mean, it's again, that facade of like being validated by that transaction or whatever. So I think that's the downside to it, but it's not the most, there's a lot more things out there in the world of reality television.
Yeah.
Good for them.
All right. Just before we end this, was there any big takeaways for you personally that you realized like after the book?
Well, it was interesting because the book came out in April. So it came out at the absolute like height of the pandemic reaching North America and Europe and sort of the world outside Asia, essentially. And like really like just in the heart of lockdown when everything was really starting to fall apart. And so it was interesting because it was, it was written from a time that was a bit earlier. And yet so much of what we saw was this realization of the value of the entrepreneurs in our communities. Like people are like, oh yeah, it's not, okay, well, we're not really talking about startups anymore. Like we're talking about the coffee shop in the corner. That's what this is about. And so I think the value of the everyday entrepreneur and the things that link them all together is the thing that really came away with it for me.
All right, so we'll go to our final question now. We always ask a whimsical question at the end. It's always the same one. I don't know if you're a MMA fan or a wrestling fan, but the fighters always come out. They've got their intro music. The lights go down, their music starts, and they strut out. What would your intro music be? So if I'm going to invite you to be my keynote speaker, what music do I play to herald you onto the stage?
It's funny because I was actually asked that as a keynote speaker pretty frequently.
Brilliant.
And I always said, play Bill Withers' Lovely Day.
Nice.
Excellent.
That's a good choice.
Never a bad call.
Yeah. I think you're the first guest who
was not surprised by the question.
Totally prepared without knowing. Yeah.
I've been asked that surprisingly a number of times, and that's my default answer, and I'm going to stick to it.
Awesome. Brilliant. All right. Thanks so much, David. It was a real pleasure, and I really enjoyed the book. Thank you again for doing the narration yourself. You have no idea how many bad audiobooks I've listened to. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Take care.
You've made it to the end of another episode of Tech Society.
On this day in tech history, November 13th, 1851, the world's first underwater telegraph cable opens for business, enabling communication between London and Paris.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. That's it from John and I. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you head on over to the website and sign up to the newsletter. And don't forget to lock up when you leave.